Well, let's see how much of this I can get through. Ooh, it's interesting to try to record a 20-minute speech. Well, we about to do it. So yeah, March 13th. Wow, wow, wow. So a year ago today was when the country began to shut down. That Friday, I got a text message from a friend who said, better get what you need this weekend. The governor's going to shut down the state, other than to go to work, doctor, and the grocery store. I texted tons of people, perhaps even some of y'all, to tell you to go get your stuff. And then I went to the store to get toilet paper, hand sanitizer, Lysol, and Clorox wipes. Wow, wow, wow. What a wild ride this last year has been. We're in a pandemic. We're working from home, educating from home, witnessing both protest and insurrection. For some, economic stability is challenged. For some, their relationships are challenged with too much togetherness. It can be really challenging when there's too little opportunity for the distractions that so easily numb us to our own stuff. Whew, where are we putting all that? My name is Pevia. I use she, her pronouns. I live here in Red Springs in Robeson County on the unceded territory of the ancestors of the Lumbee, Tuscarora, and Cheraw, where we most recently defeated the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. Each December during winter solstice, I spend some time visioning what I want for the next year. I spend time in ceremony, in prayer, in stillness, in meditation. In December 2019, deep in my bones and my spirit, I felt that it was going to be an amazing year. I felt 2020 was going to be a year like none other. This was true for myself and many of my friends. Maybe it was true for you too. The feeling that 2020 was going to be a breakthrough year, a year of great possibility, which also felt an odd contradiction to the turbulent times in which we live. Here are some of my journal entries. January 1st, 2020, 8:15 a.m. Well, hello, 2020. I'm glad that you are here. Not that 2019 was all that bad. It just feels that 2020 was so full of promise. 2019 had some bumps and challenges along the way that grew me. I think 2020 will be a year of new insights and breakthroughs. Later that afternoon, 3:13, I felt prompted to write. Those things, those ideas, those dreams are yours to bring forth, but not just from your thinking and doing, but also from your being guided by things unseen, by the ancestors in your past and the generations in the future, by letting the doing arise from the being, by listening to the Creator. January 5th, 2020. Ready for life to resume post-holidays, prepping for the trip to New York for my first APAP meeting, excited to present there with my dear friend Carol McCord. Took down all the decorations except for the tree. I'm ready for it to come down too. That will be the last of 2019, and I will be fully planted in 2020, the year of perfect vision. So how about you? How are you expecting 2020 to be? Did you have a sense of it? Did you have a plan? How did you greet the entrance of 2020? More journal entries. Friday, the 13th of March, 2020, 1 year ago. Strange times and sometimes scary. This week, all of my work was canceled through the end of April. For the foreseeable future, I have no revenue from my usual sources. Monday and Tuesday, the fear felt overwhelming. By Wednesday afternoon, I was able to ground and think of ways to pivot. I recognize my privilege in being able to do that. I found a deep green pen to journal with. Writing with green ink always makes me happy. It reminds me of nature and feeling grounded. I have to chuckle, though, as the pen is running out of ink. I hope this is not a sign. I hope my toolkit has enough tools. This is surreal. Ding, text message. Get everything you need this weekend. Governor is shutting down the state on Monday. Wednesday, March 18, 2020. Cases are above 6,000 now and rising daily. Hundreds are dead here in the US. And I'm confused about this whole mask thing. And since when did health become political? I really believe we can protect each other. I was overwhelmed with feeling yesterday. I had to write. I posted it on social media, which I really haven't done in a while. Neither write nor post. This is going to be a roller coaster ride. Buckle up. As my individual routine started shifting, the things that I counted on to frame my day, to distract me, to soothe me, to validate me, to entertain me, really began to disappear. And all the things that used to sit in my shadow, stuff back there to get to hide from, really came front and center. Depending on who you are and what you need for peace, quarantining can be an interesting experience. I typically live alone and I'm an introvert, and I count on solitude for my peace. And I ended up with a roommate who needed a place to stay for the first 3 months of the pandemic. So, creator got jokes. And one day in the middle of it all, I was like, "Oh, what is this thing I'm feeling?" I'm like, am I feeling anxious? Or, like, as I was raised to say, are my nerves getting bad? Nah, that can't be. Let me just get back to work. But I began to feel the anxiety rise, and I just started, devising and strategizing and trying to figure it out. We're so conditioned to think our way out of things and to take action without reflection, which is really kind of by way of reaction rather than guidance. We get so busy doing, and the doing takes us away from the being. It is in our being that we are connected to our greatness and to our fullest capacity. There's really something so divine when the doing, when what we choose to do arises from the being, from something that was whispered there. We're clear that it's the next right action. What happens when we get still first to see what might be trying to emerge? What new things might the Creator be bringing forth? Be still and know. This year was certainly an opportunity and an offering for us to do that. But did we recognize it? I didn't at first. Do you remember when you realized that things were going to shift? What did you do? Did you do or did you be? We have become so conditioned to doing. For me, the doing didn't even overcome the anxiety, it probably exacerbated it. And in time, I was actually surprised to realize that there was some grief as well along with that. It wasn't heavy grieving in the way that I always wanted to be in bed, but there were certainly days that I wanted to do just that. There were many days over the summer when my garden was watered with my tears. There were days when I just felt sad and I didn't really know why. Nothing that I could put my fingers on in the moment. There's some beautiful work by Pauline Goss around ambiguous loss. They kind of just stumbled in my path, and is really beautiful work. And it felt appropriate for me at the time in this year of everything was shifting. And I let myself feel and grieve for what I needed to feel and to grieve for the loss of the year that I had planned and worked really hard for, to grieve for the loss of mobility around the country and the county, even. Grief for not being able to be with others, and grief for my privacy. I actually had that roommate I was telling you about. I had to give myself permission to grieve these things. And I felt guilty because others had it worse. I struggled to remind myself that my guilt did not make their plight any better. I could allow myself to heal those unhealed parts. And perhaps in my healing, I could work through some of this grief, and it would open up some space that could be of contribution to others. Because what a difference between how we all started this year and where we are now, or started 2020. Just let that sit in for a moment. Like, where did we put all that? Where did you put your grief? Where did we put our disappointment, that loss? Where did you put it? When I asked myself those questions, I felt myself inhale deeply, and I expanded and began to experience an instinctive pull to ground in my body, till I just find a way to take it all in to metabolize it. Grounding in our bodies is important. Most of us have actually accented our bodies, and we live in our heads. And the best that most of us can do is go back and forth. But few of us really live in our bodies. We often act from painful avoidance. Not only do we not like conflict, we don't like pain. But we must accept painful things. We can do hard things. We do not have to control our pain, although we almost always try. I was really grateful to have had the learning and practice of the ambiguous loss work, and I do invite you into learning more about it, and I'll put some resources in the chat when we come into the Zoom space. But it invited me further into grieving of my personal childhood wounding and trauma, further grieving of my divorce, the loss of my parents. It wasn't that I went looking for it. I just slowed down to see what was already there in the sadness, in the anger, in the myriad of feelings that I was experiencing in this new experience. this time of COVID. The more I grieved, the better and lighter I felt. Each of us individually has healing work to do. This year has not been easy. Self-care is essential. To grieve the year that we had planned and to look at what is coming up for each of us individually as we've been forced to slow down, to hunker down, to be in these challenging conversations. And many of us are coming into a dance with our own wounds. There's some beautiful work by Eduardo Duran, who talks about soul wounds of Indigenous people, and Resmaa Menakem, who talks about racialized trauma in the bodies of Black, white, and Blue people, talks about what happened to our bodies and to our emotions and to our experience as we came to form this country called America. In A Burst of Light, written after she was diagnosed with cancer for a second time, beautiful author Audre Lorde talks about self-care as a radical political act. She says, caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that is an act of political warfare. And really for women, caring for ourselves in a way of preserving ourselves in a world that is hostile to our identity and to our community, yeah. They tell us, we get this whispering that self-care is like a luxury. It's not a luxury. It's not a luxury. It's essential. So let's practice some self-care right here. It's not really as important to talk about it as it is to do it. So yeah, I'm just going to invite you to let your eyes gaze somewhere away from the screen. And just begin to notice the rise and fall of your belly. I'm just going to take a minute, maybe 90 seconds to ground into our bodies. Beginning to notice the rise and fall of your belly. Beginning to notice the rise and fall of your chest. Beginning to notice the inhale and the exhale in your nostrils. And inviting deeper breaths. Inhaling, exhaling, inhaling, exhaling. One last time, inhaling, exhaling. Beautiful thing about grounding in the body is that it keeps us in the present moment because the body only exists in this moment. The mind will run ahead and it will go in the past. But grounding us in the body in this present moment can help us expand. Yeah, so back to last year and up to this year. In time, we adapted, whether in an intentional way or not. We figured out how to do most of the things that we've been doing. We figured out quarantine as a temporary measure. We learned more about Zoom and other platforms than we had ever imagined. Some people lost jobs. Some began to have Zoom fatigue. Oh, there are days when I'm like, please don't make me look at another screen. Parents became homeschool teachers, if they were privileged enough to do so. And I'm sure many of you are thinking privilege, but yeah. The numbers continue to climb, numbers that we previously didn't imagine we could even tolerate. Data that Black and brown bodies were disproportionately affected, the videos of frontline workers begging for PPE, and of the trucks that served as morgues. Where do we put all that? And then more videos and stories of Black bodies being killed by vigilantes or police to add to the countless stories we were already holding. Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, where most of us watched or heard about this senseless murder by a policeman having his knee on Mr. Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. What names would you like to add to the list? You can say their names, put them in the chat. Back to the diary, January 1st, 2020. Whew, this is all too much. I take wellness breaks from the news, but it's all the circles that I'm engaged in can talk about. It's all we can think about. How could it be any other way? The madness of watching a man brutally murdered, then protests taken over by those looking to leverage these protests to do greater harm. I feel rage, I feel hopeless, I feel sad, I feel helpless. I remember the protests of 1968 while living in Baltimore. I feel that same fear in my body. I learned the word necropolitics from Professor Brittany Cooper, author of Eloquent Rage. It begins with the assertion that the ultimate expression of sovereignty resides to a large degree in the power and capacity to dictate who may live and who must die, and we are living those politics now. There are also tornadoes, earthquakes, hurricanes, flooding, and fires. Right now, when I'm recording this, Texas is covered in snow in ways and ice that it never has before. Many of my friends and myself are frontline organizers. People are getting sick, running out of food, money, and people are dying. What's happening is that we are actually being activated in personal and collective ways. Our personal and collective soul nerve, as Resmaa Menakem talks about, the vagus nerve, is highly activated. I think of it as like the thyroid for our spiritual and emotional well-being. And it's out of whack. It's just been too much activation. It's the vagus nerve, and it's a cranial nerve that actually communicates with other parts of the body. It sends information to most of the organs in the chest and the abdomen, as well as to the neck, including the digestive system, liver, spleen, pancreas, heart, and lungs. The vagus nerve is closely tied to the immune system, and recent research shows it regulates the body's inflammation due to disease. We really need that right now. We really need to be able to regulate our body's response to disease. It's also called the love nerve, which I really dig. The caretaking nerve. It helps us to communicate. It helps us empathize by orienting gaze. So something about us right now is really heightened, and we're turning away from it rather than helping ourselves ground and manage everything that's happening to us so that we don't do more harm, create more fear, create more anxiety out in the world. What are we going to do when we come back together? The challenge is, do we turn away from everything that we've been through, or do we heal through it? It is an act of liberation to name the truth and to give and to get what we need. We've been taught well to hurtle over our pain instead of to heal from it, or worse yet, ignore it and just drag it along. It's what Resmaa Menakem calls clean pain and dirty pain. He writes brilliantly about this in his book, My Grandmother's Hands. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to get it. Clean pain is that pain that mends and can build your capacity for growth. Dirty pain is the pain of avoidance and blame and denial. When people respond from their most wounded parts, become cruel or violent, or physically or emotionally run away, that's when we experience dirty pain. And we create more of it for ourselves and for others and those around us. And it can be a kind of innocuous too, this looking away from. We can have exchanges like, hey, how you doing? I'm good. How about you? Oh, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. But what if we told the truth and listened to each other? It might sound something like, oh, there are days when I feel scared. There are days when I feel angry. There are days when I feel joy. Some days I feel exuberance, celebration. Days when I feel like I'm going to die. There are days when I feel like I want to hurt somebody. Yeah, we are much more complex than the simple answers that hide our truths. There have been times when I've been dancing around my little house all by myself, and there have been other times when I've been soul weary and spiritually hungry. I've actually heard myself speak that out loud to some of my dear friends with whom I dare speak the truth. And speaking it helps. Tending to it helps even more. And yeah, healing involves discomfort, but so does refusing to heal, to not look at this, what we've been through. This last year has been brutal and injurious to our spirits. We have witnessed and experienced great suffering. I think this time has also held hope for us in many ways, with the extended protests and the conversation of race and injustice becoming more front and center. There have been monuments that came down, roads renamed, and perhaps even a bridge. In Indian country, we've seen 3 pipelines canceled, some names changed on sports teams, some images removed from marketing products, and tribal land sovereignty has been upheld. So how do we hold all this? The grief, the sorrow, the anger, the excitement, the fear, being weary, helpless, hopeless. Ooh, I see an opening. Ooh, do I have to get out of my PJs? These images that are waking people up can tear us apart too and inflict deep wounding, activating our soul wound. We've had conflicts right here in Robeson County and protests. Where do we put all that? And how can we have these hard conversations? In this last year, I spent hours on calls with friends and clients who are all experiencing stress and anxiety. As I ask each one, how's your self-care? How's your spiritual practice? Each one also expressed a reduction or absence of that in the awareness of the elevation of stress and anxiety. I get it. I get it. I feel all of these things, and I let them move through me, and I through them to arrive integrated and whole on the other side, holding both the struggle and the beauty. Twice a month, I hold a healing circle for women in Alamance County who are doing work across race equity lines. And we were all holding so much in that space. And so I invited them in between the next time we saw each other to think about moments when they were feeling joy. And so when we came back together, it was interesting that everyone was having joy. We just hadn't really paid attention to it. We hadn't slowed down to let our bodies feel the joy, because if we shut ourselves off from the pain, we also shut ourselves off from the joy. And so we do have collective pain, but we can also have collective healing as we deal with our individual pain and invite our individual healing. During this time of COVID, my mother's name was Mildred Pevia, and I have been amazed at how many times my mother Mildred's personality has showed up in me. She was fierce, and I loved her dearly, and she showed up in me. I've also been amazed at how vivid the dreams have been, how clear the whisperings and how deep the witness. What have I lost? What have I gained? What have I learned? What have I lost? What have I gained? What have I learned in this last year? We have anxiety about the political landscape of this country. We have anxiety about our lives, our futures, our children, our parents, about our very survival. And all of this impacts our bodies, our health, shows up as heart issues, blood pressure, weight gain, diabetes. So let's take some time to ground in our bodies. Begin a daily practice of grounding in your bodies. And when we go live, we'll do some grounding practices so that you can understand the value of it. Because once we start approaching our body with curiosity rather than fear, everything shifts. I believe in working hard. I call it sacred rigor. But I also believe in resting and renewal. Sacred rigor, sacred rest, sacred renewal, and repeat. Sacred rigor, sacred rest, sacred renewal, and repeat. And our bodies, these glorious, resilient bodies, they hold what came before, what we need to heal from our ancestors, from the historical generational trauma that sits in them. And we can do that. My work is in emotional and somatic justice and liberation. There I talk about what has happened to us in our minds, emotions, spirit, and bodies as this country came to be. It is emergent work that came from following the whispers in the stillness. It came when I learned to let my intellect serve my spirit and not the other way around. It is work steeped in love, not the mamby-pamby kind of love, but the kind of love that speaks truth. It's working love. Thank you.